The colony was supposed to be one of the calmest places in human space. People often joked that the most exciting thing that happened, there was a delivery ship arriving late. It was a peaceful world filled with quiet homes, green fields, science labs, and people who had left Earth to start fresh. Many families chose this colony because they wanted a slower life. They wanted a place where children could grow without fear, where adults could work without stress, and where the stars felt like friendly neighbors, not distant mysteries. Every morning looked almost the same. Farmers checked the soil in their fields. Workers walked to small offices or workshops. Scientists spent hours studying harmless wildlife or testing new tools. Kids ran around in playgrounds while older people sat outside and talked about simple things like weather or new food crops. It was the kind of place where people felt safe enough to leave doors unlocked and say hello to everyone they walked past. No one imagined anything bad could reach them out here. After all, the colony had no enemies and no large resources worth fighting over. In everyone's mind, it was a tiny dot in a huge galaxy, too unimportant for anyone to worry about. On the day everything changed, the colony woke up normally. The sun climbed up from behind the hills, painting the sky with soft colors. A group of engineers worked on repairing a water filter near the community center. Students prepared for a science contest. A small team of explorers planned to go out and map a new valley. Everything felt quiet, calm, and familiar. Life moved in a gentle rhythm dot above the planet, a traffic of supply ships, research drones, and shuttlecraft passed through as usual. Everything looked routine. Nothing seemed strange. Even the early warning scanners showed a blank, peaceful sky. The colony was so far from dangerous areas that people rarely even checked the defensive system logs. There just was never a reason to. But far out, beyond the edge of normal scan range, something small flickered. Something that didn't belong there. The scanners picked up a strange pattern for only a second before losing it. The system recorded it quietly, like a tiny hiccup no one paid attention to. At first, it didn't raise any alarms. This system had detected dust storms, meteoroids, even random comets before. People trusted the tech completely. If something serious was coming, the alarms would shout. So when nothing shouted, life continued. Back on the ground, a transport shuttle landed outside the marketplace, unloading boxes of fruit and tools. The pilot chatted casually with traders, while children watched with curiosity. They always liked seeing ships arrive and leave. It made the colony feel connected to the rest of the galaxy. A teacher guided students on a small nature walk, explaining the local plants. Two elderly neighbors sat outside their homes, sipping warm drinks and commenting on how the sky looked extra pretty today. But that sky, the same one they admired every day, was about to become the center of a moment humanity would never forget. Somewhere above the atmosphere, several objects slipped into view. They were too fast for typical civilian ships. They had no transponders, no identification signals, no attempt to communicate. The colony's scanners finally caught the readings properly and sent an automatic warning. A small light blinked in the control room, where a half-asleep operator was checking routine reports. At first, they thought it was another glitch. The system sometimes behaved oddly during magnetic storms, but the weather was clear today. They zoomed in with a manual control. When the image sharpened, confusion replaced the sleepy calm in their eyes. These shapes were not meteoroids. They were not supply vessels for nearby colonies. They looked controlled, purposeful, aligned in a pattern no natural object could form. The operator called the supervisor instantly, and within seconds more people came rushing to the screens. No one understood why unknown ships were approaching a peaceful colony with no reason to be targeted. There had been no warnings, no political tensions, no disputes over land or resources. The colony wasn't a military base. It didn't even have a proper army. It had only a small security team trained more for handling wild animals than hostile ships. The people in the control room started to panic, but they tried to stay calm. They sent out a standard greeting message asking the approaching objects to identify themselves. There was no reply. Instead, the objects changed formation, moving in a way that made every expert freeze. It wasn't random movement. It was coordinated, intentional, something no one wanted to imagine but suddenly feared. Across the colony, messages were sent out to local channels advising people to return indoors just in case. Even then, many residents didn't understand the seriousness. They trusted their leaders and believed this would be solved peacefully. After all, humanity had made friends across the galaxy, signed treaties, and built strong communication networks. Most species out there preferred trade over conflict, but the truth arrived faster than anyone expected. The unknown objects in the sky glowed for a moment, and something bright streaked downward. People standing outside looked up, confused by the strange lights. Some thought they were meteors. Others thought they were fireworks from a celebration somewhere. A few recognized danger instantly, but didn't even have time to shout warnings. The colony shook. It wasn't a violent or graphic scene. There was no explosion that ripped through the world in a dramatic way. But the shockwave traveled across the surface like a sudden storm, knocking people off their feet, rattling windows, and sending a wave of panic through everyone. The ground felt like it trembled from inside, as if the planet itself was startled. Lights flickered. Communication screens cut off. People screamed, not from injury, but from fear and confusion. Parents grabbed children and ran toward shelters. Workers rushed to secure equipment. The entire colony, which had lived in peace for so long, suddenly felt like it was standing on a breaking edge. In the control room, alarms blared, finally too late to stop the first strike, but loud enough to confirm that this was not an accident. Someone had attacked the colony on purpose. Someone had crossed a line that no one thought would ever be crossed. The Colony Council tried to send distress signals to nearby stations and to Human Central Command. The messages went out in quick bursts. Some of them scrambled from the shock, but they still carried the same urgent meaning. Something unknown had attacked, and the colony needed immediate help. A group of volunteer responders moved quickly through the streets, guiding confused residents toward safe buildings. There was dust in the air, debris on the ground, but the community worked together. There was no chaos or disorder, just fear and determination. Humans had always been good at helping each other when things went wrong, and that instinct took over instantly. People who had never met before formed small teams, checking if anyone needed assistance. A technician used a portable scanner to check damaged areas, while a farmer helped move heavy equipment out of the way. A few young residents climbed onto roofs to signal rescue drones manually. Even in fear, the colony held on to hope. Above the planet, the unknown ships didn't linger. They moved away just as fast as they had arrived, disappearing into the dark space beyond scan range. They left behind confusion, damage, and a question that echoed through every mind. Why? Why attack a peaceful colony? What did they want? And more importantly, who were they? When the first broadcast reached Earth and the larger human settlements, the reaction was immediate. People from every background watched in shock. The footage showed frightened families, damaged structures, and emergency teams working with urgency. Even though the damage was not too large, the emotional impact was massive. People didn't have to see destruction to feel the weight of what had happened. The message was enough. A human colony had been attacked intentionally. Across human space, anger rose like a wave. Fear too, but mostly anger. This was not a misunderstanding or a random accident. It was a deliberate act. one that hit innocent people who had no part in any conflict. That struck at the core of what humans valued: family, home, and safety. Human leaders gathered within hours. Experts analyzed signals and debris. Scientists studied traces left behind in the atmosphere. Everything pointed to one thing: an unknown species had carried out the attack, and it wasn't done by mistake. The colony survivors sent updates as communication improved. They described the moment the sky changed, the sound of the ground trembling, and the confusion that followed. But they also described something else: unity. Everyone had come together without hesitation to support each other. Children were comforted by strangers. Neighbors checked on neighbors. People helped repair damaged systems and shared whatever supplies they had. In the middle of fear, humanity showed its strongest side. And as Earth watched these reports, as humans across space saw the quiet courage of a small colony, something shifted deep inside them. A spark began to grow. A promise. A message that spread quietly from one person to another. If someone thought humanity would break, they were wrong. If someone thought attacking a small colony would make humans retreat, they misunderstood them completely. This attack did something the enemy would regret. It united humans in a way nothing else had, because someone hadn't just struck a colony. They had awakened something powerful, something patient, protective, and unshakably determined. Someone had stirred the dragon. The moment the first reports of the attack reached Human Central Command, the atmosphere changed everywhere. People who had been working quietly, reading, studying, or farming suddenly felt a sharp knot of concern. It wasn't just sadness. It was a deep, stirring anger that came from knowing that someone had hurt people who were completely innocent. News spread faster than ever, and even colonies far from the attacked one listened closely. This wasn't a distant incident. It was a call to notice something important. Humanity had been tested. Investigators immediately began to study every piece of data available. They looked at the signals sent by the colony's scanners, examined traces of energy left behind, and collected fragments from the debris. Every small clue was examined carefully. Patterns were identified. The shapes of the attackers' ships, the paths they took, the type of energy they used, it all told a story. The story was clear. This was no accident. This was planned. Someone had deliberately targeted a peaceful human settlement. People in command rooms worked around the clock. They were tired, they were frustrated, and they were worried, but they were determined. Nothing about humanity had prepared them for this kind of attack, yet they refused to be paralyzed. Scientists, strategists, and ordinary volunteers came together to understand what had happened. Even people far from the colony found ways to help. Students used small satellites to gather additional data. Engineers designed stronger warning systems. Farmers shared supplies and vehicles to help emergency teams reach the damaged areas. Every skill, no matter how small, became part of the effort. Slowly, a picture of the attackers began to emerge. They belonged to a species that humans had barely known existed. For years, humans had heard rumors about their presence, distant and fragmented, never interacting with them directly. They were intelligent, organized, and ambitious, but they had always stayed far from human space. Until now. The evidence suggested that they believed humans were spreading too quickly across the galaxy. They thought humans were weak, that fear and intimidation would stop them, and that attacking a small colony would send a message. They had miscalculated. Every piece of intelligence suggested that humans were not only resilient, but capable of turning disaster into opportunity. As news of the attack spread from colony to colony, people reacted differently. Some were afraid, wondering if their home could be next. Some were angry, demanding immediate retaliation. And some felt an instinctive determination to protect humanity no matter what. This determination wasn't just from leaders or trained soldiers. It came from ordinary people, teachers, engineers, shopkeepers, parents, students. Everyone, in some small or big way, decided they would contribute. They would not let fear dictate their actions. At the colony itself, the recovery began immediately. Survivors worked to repair damaged homes, restore electricity, and ensure clean water. Children who had been frightened found comfort in the calm guidance of adults. Strangers became friends overnight as people came together to share food, shelter, and encouragement. The small hospital treated injuries, while others focused on rebuilding essential systems. It was not easy, and progress was slow, but the human spirit pushed forward. Even in the shadow of fear, hope and courage flourished. Meanwhile, in Human Central Command, leaders debated their next steps. They understood one critical truth: the attack was intentional, and the attackers had expected humans to react in fear. But fear was not what humans showed. Instead, they showed organization, courage, and readiness. The leadership decided that immediate communication with the attackers was necessary, both to understand their motives and to send a clear message. At the same time, humans began preparing defenses. Fleets were moved closer to key positions, emergency shelters were stocked, and research teams began developing technology that could detect and neutralize threats more effectively. Every preparation was precise and calculated. Humans were not acting out of anger alone. They acted with intelligence and planning. Back on the colony, life slowly returned to a form of normalcy. Children went back to school, although some still clung to parents longer than before. Adults resumed their work, repairing and improving what had been damaged. The sense of community grew stronger than ever. People realized that no matter how small or distant a colony might seem, humanity was connected. What happened to one affected all. This shared experience created bonds that were unbreakable. It was a reminder that people could face even the most unexpected challenges when they worked together. Even as recovery continued, humans began sending messages beyond their own space. They reached out to neighboring species, sharing the facts about the attack. The goal was not just to alert others, but to show that humans were not afraid. They were united. They were strong. Other species began to take notice. Some were curious, some were impressed, and some were cautious. In the eyes of the galaxy, humans were no longer just another species. They were a people capable of surprising courage and resilience. Slowly, the reputation of humanity began to change. People started using a new nickname when they spoke in whispers across starships: the Dragon. Calm until provoked, but unstoppable once awakened. At the same time, the investigation into the attacker's identity deepened. Intelligence teams analyzed every fragment of information, every bit of unusual energy, every unusual maneuver in space, and every trace of communication was studied. Patterns emerged showing that the attackers were highly organized, had advanced technology, and had coordinated their movements carefully. Humans realized that this was not a simple act of aggression. It was a strategic strike intended to intimidate and send a message. The mistake the attackers made was underestimating human resilience and unity. As humans prepared for possible further encounters, ordinary citizens played an important role. People volunteered to help train emergency teams, repair damaged spacecraft, and organize communication networks. Students participated in simulations and research projects. Workers shared expertise in logistics and management. Everyone, no matter their background, had something to contribute. This collective effort built not only practical solutions, but a sense of shared purpose. Humans were learning to move as one, and that unity was something no attacker could easily break. The leaders of human space recognized that a single colony could not remain isolated from galactic politics. They began sending formal messages to the attackers, carefully written and deliberate. These messages were calm, professional, and firm. Humans expressed that attacks on peaceful colonies were unacceptable and that any further aggression would be met with decisive response. At the same time, humans offered an opportunity for dialogue, showing that they preferred understanding and negotiation over conflict. The message was clear. Humans were not weak, but they valued life and fairness. They wanted peace, but they were ready to defend themselves. News from the colony, combined with reports from Human Central Command, spread quickly across all human worlds. Citizens everywhere followed updates, discussed the situation, and prepared for any eventuality. The attack had not just harmed a distant settlement, it had awakened the entire human species. People who had never thought about space politics or defense suddenly understood that their home was part of something larger. They realized that protecting humanity was a responsibility shared by all, not just leaders or soldiers. In the days following the attack, humans made a conscious effort to rebuild and improve their systems. The colony installed stronger communication networks, advanced early warning systems, and better emergency protocols. Scientists studied the debris to learn more about the attacker's technology. Every repair and improvement was a step toward readiness. Humans were not acting out of panic. They were acting out of wisdom, preparation, and the desire to protect one another. Even amid this serious work, humans never lost their humanity. People laughed quietly in the mess halls, told stories to comfort children, and helped neighbors in small, meaningful ways. They understood that fear could not be allowed to dominate life. By showing courage, resilience, and compassion, the colony became a symbol of what humans were capable of when faced with adversity. It was no longer just a settlement. It was a beacon of hope, unity, and determination. As weeks passed, reports from the attackers were finally pieced together. Humans discovered that the species had expected the colony to crumble under fear, that humans would retreat or surrender, and that other colonies would take note and act cautiously. Instead, the opposite had happened. The attack had unified humans more than ever before. Ordinary people had acted heroically, leaders had coordinated brilliantly, and the survivors had shown extraordinary resilience. The attackers had unintentionally provoked a force far greater than they had imagined. The collective strength of humanity. In the end, part 2 of the story is not about revenge or hatred. It is about understanding and action. Humans learned that threats could arrive suddenly and without warning, but they also learned that courage, intelligence, and unity could overcome fear. The attack on one colony became the catalyst for a human awakening. People everywhere realized that their actions mattered, that their skills mattered, and that their bonds mattered. The human spirit was alive, alert, and ready to face whatever challenges might come next, and somewhere deep inside. After the initial shock of the attack and the early investigations, humans across the colonies and Earth began to act in ways that surprised even themselves. It was not fear that drove them. It was focus, determination, and a growing sense of responsibility. Ordinary people who had never imagined themselves as part of a larger struggle suddenly understood that the survival and future of humanity depended on unity, intelligence, and courage. Factories, research centers, and workshops that had been working on everyday projects were quickly redirected toward more urgent tasks. Machines that once built farming equipment, habitats, or transportation systems were now used to develop tools for detection, early warning, and protective measures. Engineers who had been designing simple drones now worked on multi-purpose rescue and reconnaissance machines. Students who had studied theoretical physics applied their knowledge to improving communication systems. Everyone, no matter their role, found a way to contribute to the common effort. Even artists and storytellers helped, creating messages and visuals to boost morale and keep spirits high. In cities and colonies, people volunteered in ways they never thought they could. Teachers organized drills to prepare students for emergencies. Farmers offered their vehicles and labor to transport supplies and help rebuild damaged areas. Workers in offices, shops, and factories coordinated logistics to ensure that essential resources reached the right places on time. Across all human space, people began realizing something profound. They were stronger together than alone. The spirit that had allowed colonies to thrive quietly in remote corners of the galaxy was now becoming a force that could not be ignored. Families who had once worried only about their daily lives began to see themselves as part of something bigger. Conversations in homes, marketplaces, and workplaces started focusing on preparation, strategy, and cooperation. People discussed what they had learned from the attack, what mistakes they could avoid in the future, and how to protect their neighbors. The sense of community grew beyond individual settlements. Humans realized that every colony, every station, and every family mattered. The attack on one had awakened care and responsibility in all. The nickname the Dragon began to quietly spread. Other species in the galaxy, who had watched humanity's response with curiosity, began to use it as well. Humans were calm and deliberate, but beneath that calm, a determination had awakened that was both powerful and careful. They were no longer just reactive. They were thinking, planning, and learning. The Dragon did not rush blindly. It observed, adapted, and then acted with precision. Even those who had underestimated humanity before now had reason to reconsider at the colony that had been attacked. People continued their efforts to rebuild. They worked long hours, not just to restore what had been damaged, but to improve systems for the future. Communication networks were reinforced to prevent future disruptions. Power and water systems were upgraded. Children returned to school, and adults returned to work, but everything was different now. There was a sense of shared purpose in every task. No one saw these actions as small. They knew each contribution added to the larger strength of humanity. Meanwhile, human leadership across space recognized that this awakening needed careful guidance. Fleets were repositioned, not for revenge, but to ensure security and readiness. Emergency shelters were upgraded and stocked. Intelligence teams worked day and night to study the attackers' technology, movements, and potential strategies. Human diplomacy began to expand, not just toward other species, but also toward colonies and settlements, reinforcing trust, unity, and preparedness. Communication became central. Every citizen, whether in a small settlement or a major city, felt connected to this broader human network. The attack had been a catalyst, and now humans were learning how to act as a connected force. Despite the seriousness of the preparations, life retained its human essence. People found ways to keep morale high. Music, art, and storytelling became part of the recovery and preparation. Children played and laughed, their curiosity undimmed by fear. Adults told stories of courage and resilience, passing lessons from one generation to another. Humor, kindness, and encouragement became as important as any technology. Humans understood that their strength lay not just in tools or systems, but in their spirit, cooperation, and care for one another. The attack had also inspired innovation on a scale that surprised many. Scientists and engineers collaborated across colonies in ways they never had before. They shared ideas, plans, and solutions freely. Designs for protective drones, surveillance systems, and emergency protocols were exchanged and improved upon rapidly. Universities and research centers opened their knowledge to public participation, involving students, hobbyists, and professionals alike. This collective effort demonstrated that humans did not just survive, they adapted, grew, and prepared for whatever might come next. Communication between colonies became more efficient. People developed networks that allowed information to travel almost instantly, allowing decisions to be made faster and more effectively. Supplies could be distributed quickly, and alerts could reach everyone in real time. This level of coordination was unprecedented, and yet humans adapted to it naturally. They learned that cooperation and preparedness were as important as courage, and together, these qualities made them formidable. Leaders also realized the importance of maintaining calm and clarity. Messages sent to the rest of the galaxy emphasized that humans preferred peace, dialogue, and understanding, but they would not accept attacks on innocent colonies. The tone was firm, yet measured. Humans were not acting out of anger, they were acting out of responsibility and the desire to protect their people. The message resonated with allies and neutral species alike. Humans were no longer seen as passive or naive. They were respected for their courage, intelligence, and readiness, not at the same time. The story of the attacked colony became symbolic. It was not just about destruction or loss. It was about resilience, courage, and unity. The way people came together, helped one another, and adapted to the unexpected inspired hope across the galaxy. Citizens everywhere were reminded that even small actions could contribute to a larger outcome. Picking up debris, sharing food, comforting children, designing a new tool all became part of the human story. Everyone had a role, and every role mattered. The attackers, watching from afar, began to notice something they had not anticipated. They had expected fear, confusion, and retreat. Instead, they saw humans organize, rebuild, and prepare calmly. They saw unity, intelligence, and resilience. What they thought would weaken humanity had only made it stronger. The attack, intended as a demonstration of power, had awakened a force that was patient, deliberate, and unstoppable once engaged. Even ordinary people, who had once felt small and powerless, began to feel the weight of their collective strength. They understood that they were part of a species that could face unimaginable challenges and still rise. Parents, teachers, workers, and children all found courage in this knowledge. It was not the courage of individuals alone. It was the courage of a community, a network, a civilization that had learned to move together. This was the true power of humanity. Stories of bravery and care spread quickly. A farmer helping his neighbor fix a damaged shelter. A child helping an elderly person navigate broken streets. An engineer sharing designs freely to aid other colonies. These small acts built a larger narrative of resilience and unity. People began to understand that the dragon they were awakening was not about anger or destruction. It was about preparedness, intelligence, and the collective human spirit. Across human space, the nickname dragon took root. It was not a name of violence, but a symbol of power hidden in calm, patience, and careful planning. Other species learned that attacking humans would not produce fear, it would produce organization, adaptation, and resilience. The dragon was quiet until awakened, but once it stirred, it moved with precision, unity, and determination that could not be ignored. Preparation continued. Defense systems were strengthened, communication networks expanded, and research accelerated. But humans never lost sight of the most important part of their strength, humanity itself. Communities remained kind, caring, and supportive. The focus was not on fighting alone, but on protecting life, helping neighbors, and learning from every challenge. Humans were proving that their greatest weapon was not technology or numbers, it was their spirit. Every day, more people joined in. Volunteers assisted in research, repair, and coordination. Students contributed ideas and projects. Families supported one another. Each small effort added to the collective strength. The dragon was not a myth. It was a reality being built, step by step, through courage, intelligence, and unity. By the end of this period, humans had accomplished something extraordinary. They had transformed fear into focus, anger into action, and uncertainty into preparedness. They had learned that unity and careful planning could turn even the most dangerous challenge into an opportunity to grow stronger. Ordinary citizens, acting together, had awakened a force that was calm, deliberate, and unyielding. The galaxy watched in quiet awe. Humans were no longer just another species. They had become a symbol of resilience, intelligence, and care. The attack that was meant to intimidate had inced. After weeks of preparation, analysis, and rebuilding, humanity was ready to face the unknown in a way it had never done before. The attacked colony had become a center of both learning and inspiration. From there, humans could see clearly how fragile peace could be, but also how strong unity made them. They had rebuilt not only structures, but also their confidence. Ordinary people had shown extraordinary courage. Leaders had coordinated across colonies. Engineers, students, and volunteers had created tools and systems that no one had thought possible before. Now, humanity was ready to reach out to the attackers. The first step was communication. Humans knew that knowledge and understanding were as important as technology and strength. A message was prepared, carefully written, and tested. It was calm, precise, and firm. It made no threats, but explained clearly that attacking peaceful colonies was unacceptable. Humans emphasized that they valued life and wanted dialogue to prevent future harm. They offered a chance for discussion, hoping the attackers would respond reasonably. This message, unlike most formal announcements, was sent not only from leadership, but from representatives of ordinary citizens as well. It carried the voices of people who had survived, rebuilt, and learned from the attack. The transmission was sent across the galaxy. People everywhere followed its progress, watching for any response. In homes, classrooms, and workplaces, citizens waited, hoping that reason would prevail. But what came back was not the message humans had hoped for. The attackers responded with arrogance and dismissal. They spoke as if humans were fragile, emotional, and incapable of understanding strategy. Their words implied that humans would be intimidated or easily frightened by further threats. This response surprised no one who knew the human spirit. Those same people who had endured fear, confusion, and damage now understood that patience and precision were as important as courage. Humans did not reply with anger or rash action. They prepared carefully, refining their plans, strengthening their defenses, and training fleets for coordinated movement. They combined technology, strategy, and foresight with something that no opponent could imitate: humanity itself, the ability to work together, to learn from mistakes, and to protect one another. Meanwhile, life in the colonies continued, but nothing was the same. Children played, but parents were more vigilant. Workers continued their tasks, but with a renewed sense of purpose. Communities organized drills, emergency exercises, and coordination plans. People learned quickly that survival did not only mean physical protection, it also meant mental readiness, calm decision-making, and mutual support. Every citizen, regardless of age or profession, began to see themselves as part of a larger system of human defense and preparedness. In the background, scientists and engineers worked tirelessly. They studied the attackers' previous maneuvers and technological patterns. They tested new designs for drones, communication relays, and sensor networks. Students assisted by running simulations and analyzing data. Farmers, artisans, and volunteers found creative ways to support these efforts, from supplying materials to constructing experimental facilities. Slowly, humans were learning the attackers' methods without ever directly engaging them. The dragon was learning to see clearly before moving. As preparations continued, humans also reached out to allies and neutral species. They shared knowledge about the attack, emphasizing the need for caution and cooperation. Some species were impressed by human organization and determination. Others were cautious, waiting to see how humanity would respond. But one thing was clear: humans were no longer passive. Their ability to coordinate, plan, and protect one another had made them a presence that could not be ignored. The dragon had not only awakened, it had begun to grow in the eyes of the galaxy. With systems ready and communication attempted, humans finally deployed a fleet toward the edge of the attacker's territory. This fleet was not sent to fight blindly. It was sent to observe, protect, and show that humans were prepared to act intelligently. Ships moved in formation, guided by careful planning and real-time analysis. Teams on the ground coordinated every step. Drones scouted ahead. Sensors monitored every possible threat. Humans were calm, deliberate, and ready to adapt. The attackers had assumed chaos or fear, but what they encountered was coordination, patience, and precise execution. When the fleet reached the outer boundary of the attacker's space, humans attempted one final contact. Messages were sent offering negotiation, understanding, and a chance to avoid conflict. Humans made it clear that their goal was not revenge, but protection and fairness. It was a final effort to solve the problem without unnecessary destruction. The timing, tone, and clarity of the messages showed the attackers something they had never anticipated. Humans could combine caution with courage, planning with empathy, and strength with restraint. The response from the attackers was dismissive, as expected. They ridiculed humans, claiming that their emotional reactions would make them vulnerable. But the humans did not panic or act impulsively. They had learned from their previous experiences that careful observation, analysis, and preparation were the most effective tools. Instead of rushing into combat, humans adjusted their fleet's positioning, improved communication lines, and strengthened protection measures. They were ready to respond, but only when necessary, and with precision. At the same time, humans continued to strengthen their colonies. Education, infrastructure, and community engagement were central to this process. People worked together to improve emergency systems, communication networks, and protective measures. They trained young people in problem-solving and strategy, while adults shared practical experience and guidance. Every colony, no matter how small or distant, became part of a larger network of preparedness and cooperation. This network became humanity's true strength. Even in moments of preparation, humans maintained their human qualities. They laughed, shared stories, and supported each other. Parents comforted children who were anxious about the fleet's movements. Friends helped one another adjust to new routines. Teachers used stories and games to teach lessons about caution and strategy. Art, music, and creativity continued to flourish alongside preparation. Humans understood that emotional and mental resilience were just as important as technology or tactical skill. As the fleet monitored the attacker's territory, humans observed patterns and learned about the opponent's strategies. They identified weaknesses, movement habits, and communication patterns. This intelligence was gathered without confrontation, using only observation and analysis. Humans learned to be patient, adaptive, and precise. Every piece of information became part of a larger plan. The dragon did not strike blindly. It watched, learned, and prepared. Meanwhile, citizens across human space followed developments closely. Families, workers, students, and leaders discussed each update, sharing ideas and solutions. People realized that even the smallest contribution, an observation, a repair, a calculation, could impact the larger effort. Humanity's strength was no longer measured only by individual capability, but by collective participation. The attack on one colony had awakened not only courage, but also ingenuity, collaboration, and determination. The colony that had been attacked remained a central symbol of resilience. Survivors shared experiences, lessons, and insights with other colonies and the fleet. Their stories reminded humans why preparation mattered, why unity mattered, and why courage could emerge in even the darkest moments. They inspired people everywhere to act, not out of fear, but out of responsibility and care for their fellow humans. As days turned into weeks, humans continued both preparation and observation. They reinforced communication lines, upgraded defense systems, and refined strategic plans. They strengthened the social and mental resilience of every colony. And throughout all this, humans maintained their focus on protecting life, supporting each other, and learning from every challenge. The dragon was no longer a hidden force. It had become visible, deliberate, and undeniable. The attackers, watching from afar, began to realize that their assumptions had been wrong. They had expected humans to act out of panic, fear, or anger. Instead, humans had responded with intelligence, calmness, and organization. They had strengthened their networks, trained their people, and prepared for any eventual challenge. The dragon, once underestimated, was now awake, aware, and ready. By the end of this period, humans had achieved something extraordinary. They had shown that courage was not enough. Intelligence, planning, and unity amplified it. They had demonstrated that strength could be expressed through care, coordination, and preparation. Every citizen, from the youngest child to the oldest scientist, had played a part in awakening this force. The dragon did not act recklessly. It moved with wisdom, precision, and purpose. The galaxy now watched humans with a new understanding. The species that had once seemed small, scattered, or unprepared had become a symbol of resilience, intelligence, and unity. The attack that was meant to intimidate had instead awakened a force that was calm, deliberate, and capable of protecting its own while learning and adapting. Humans had proven that they could face any threat with courage, wisdom, and cooperation. They had prepared without panic, responded without recklessness, and protected without cruelty. The dragon had awakened. After months of preparation, observation, and careful planning, humans had transformed themselves. The small colony that had once been attacked was no longer an isolated settlement. It had become the heart of a growing network of courage, intelligence, and cooperation. Across human space, citizens had realized something vital. When faced with danger, ordinary people could become extraordinary if they worked together. Every skill, no matter how small, had a place. Every effort, no matter how quiet, contributed to a larger purpose. Humanity was learning to move as one, and the attackers had not yet realized the full strength of what they had provoked. The humans did not rush into confrontation. They understood that the enemy had expected fear, chaos, or rash action. Humans were none of those things. They were calm, organized, and adaptive. Fleets moved in formation, carefully positioned to avoid unnecessary risks. Drones scanned the areas ahead. Sensors measured every anomaly. Engineers and scientists worked from both space stations and ground-based labs, monitoring and adjusting systems in real time. Every decision was deliberate, every move calculated. Humans had learned that patience was as powerful as courage. As the human fleets approached the outskirts of the attackers' territory, other species began to take notice. Reports reached neutral planets, allies, and even those who had not interacted with humans before. They saw humans moving with quiet precision. They saw the way humans adapted to every challenge, learned from every detail, and coordinated across vast distances. Slowly, whispers began to circulate among species across the galaxy. The humans were not just reacting, they were growing stronger, wiser, and more united. The dragon, once dormant, had fully awakened. At the same time, the humans maintained their human qualities. Life in the colonies continued, even under the shadow of potential conflict. Children attended school, learned, and played. Adults worked, taught, and helped one another. Communities held meetings to discuss preparation, but they also celebrated small victories. A new water filtration system repaired, a damaged communication relay restored, a small drone successfully tested. Humanity understood that life had to continue alongside preparation. Fear could not dominate, but neither could recklessness. Within the fleet, coordination was flawless. Pilots communicated seamlessly, sharing updates and adjusting strategies. Analysts monitored enemy patterns, predicting movements without acting prematurely. Engineers repaired and upgraded systems even as operations continued. Every person had a role, and every role mattered. Humans had learned that the power of a species was not only in individual skill, but in collective effort. Ordinary people had become extraordinary through collaboration. Meanwhile, the attackers continued to misjudge humanity. They had assumed that humans would act emotionally, attacking blindly in anger or fear. They believed that humans would retreat, or that colonies far from the conflict would distance themselves. Instead, humans had turned the attack into an opportunity to grow stronger, more united, and more prepared. Every action humans took, from rebuilding to training to strategy, showed intelligence, patience, and foresight. The attackers had not awakened fear, they had awakened determination. Human leaders and civilians alike understood a simple truth. Power was not just about weapons or fleets. It was about responsibility, planning, and care for one another. They prepared systems to detect threats, trained citizens to respond calmly, and coordinated resources across light years of space. Even children were taught basic emergency skills, and communities ran drills to reinforce readiness. Every colony, every station, and every settlement was part of the larger effort. Humans had created a network of resilience and strength, something no single attack could break. At the same time, humanity's response was visible to the attackers. They watched, expecting disorder, panic, or emotional overreaction. What they saw instead was calm, precise action. They saw humans protect civilians, repair damages, and learn from every encounter. They saw ordinary people become extraordinary through collaboration, intelligence, and courage. The attackers began to recognize something they had not anticipated. Humans were adaptive, patient, and relentless in their unity. The dragon did not rush blindly. It observed, learned, and prepared. Across the colonies, humans continued to strengthen their communities. Technology, while important, was only one part of their approach. Communication, trust, and cooperation were equally vital. People worked together to repair systems, organize supplies, and ensure the safety of everyone. Parents taught children skills for both safety and problem-solving. Workers shared expertise with neighbors. Even small contributions, like guiding a rescue drone or repairing a tool, added to the larger strength of humanity. Every action mattered, and every person was part of the solution. As humans gained intelligence about the attackers, they learned to anticipate and counter potential strategies without ever engaging recklessly. Analysts studied patterns, predicted movements, and advised the fleet on careful positioning. Engineers and scientists tested new technologies for surveillance, protection, and communication. Volunteers coordinated logistics, ensuring that supplies reached the fleet and colonies efficiently. The dragon moved deliberately, each step reinforcing the larger system of human preparedness. The human approach was not about revenge, it was about protection, care, and readiness. Citizens understood that preserving life, learning from experience, and maintaining unity were more powerful than striking in anger. They had seen firsthand what fear and panic could do, and they had learned to replace it with planning, coordination, and calm courage. This mindset became the foundation of humanity's strength. Meanwhile, ordinary citizens found pride in their contributions. A student who had once only studied theory helped improve a communication network. A farmer contributed vehicles and labor to ensure supplies reached key points. A young technician monitored systems from a remote station, providing vital information to fleet commanders. Each action, no matter how small, strengthened humanity as a whole. Citizens realized that they were not powerless. They were part of a living system capable of facing threats, protecting one another, and growing stronger every day. Even in the midst of preparation, humans did not lose sight of kindness and empathy. Communities supported one another emotionally and practically. Families comforted those who were anxious. Workers helped neighbors rebuild damaged equipment, and children learned to care for each other. Humanity understood that resilience was not just about defense systems or fleets. It was about maintaining spirit, hope, and compassion. Strength without empathy was meaningless. The attackers, observing human preparations, began to sense the full scale of what they had provoked. They had intended to intimidate a single colony, but instead they had awakened an entire species' potential. They saw humans act with intelligence, unity, and care, turning vulnerability into strength. They realized that the dragon they had hoped to frighten was awake, deliberate, and growing more capable by the day dot. As the human fleets approached strategic positions near the attackers' territory, further lessons were learned. Humans discovered weaknesses in enemy patrol patterns and communication structures. They improved their defensive systems to protect civilians while maintaining flexibility for strategic response. Each insight reinforced the understanding that preparation, observation, and cooperation were more effective than rash action. The dragon did not need to rush. It could wait, learn, and act with precision when the time was right. Back in the colonies, ordinary people continued to contribute. Engineers upgraded emergency systems, volunteers organized drills, and students ran simulations to improve logistics and planning. Communities shared resources, knowledge, and support. Every repair, every calculation, every shared piece of information strengthened the larger human network. The attack that was meant to intimidate had instead inspired unprecedented unity, creativity, and courage. Even amidst the growing tension, life continued. Children learned and played, families worked and supported each other, and communities maintained routines alongside preparation. Humans had discovered that life and vigilance could coexist. They did not allow fear to dominate, but neither did they act recklessly. Every step was measured, every action deliberate. Humanity's strength lay in balance, patience, and unity. As weeks passed, the attackers realized the extent of human preparation. They had expected panic, retreat, or emotional chaos. Instead, they saw humans coordinate across colonies, communicate efficiently, and adapt to challenges with calm intelligence. The dragon had not only awakened, it had learned, grown, and prepared. Every citizen, from the youngest student to the most experienced engineer, was part of a species-wide network of resilience and strength. By the end of this period, humanity had achieved something remarkable. They had taken the tragedy of an attack and transformed it into a source of strength. Ordinary people had become extraordinary through collaboration, courage, and care. Communities had grown closer, technology had advanced, and fleets were prepared without haste. The dragon was no longer a metaphor. It was real, deliberate, and undeniable. The galaxy began to take notice. Humans were no longer seen as passive or weak. They were a species capable of facing threats with intelligence, patience, and unity. The attack that was meant. After months of preparation, observation, and careful coordination, humanity reached a point where they were fully awake to the reality of their situation. The initial attack on the small colony had sparked something extraordinary. Humans were no longer acting out of fear or confusion. They were deliberate, focused, and unified. Every citizen, from the youngest student to the most experienced engineer, understood that their actions mattered, and every contribution strengthened the larger effort. Humanity had become a single, coordinated force, quietly but undeniably powerful. The fleet stationed near the attacker's territory maintained a careful balance. They were ready for confrontation, but did not act recklessly. Every movement, every scan, Every communication was precise. Humans understood that showing strength was not only about weapons or numbers, it was about intelligence, coordination, and patience. The dragon, once dormant, had now awakened, and its presence was felt across human space and beyond. The attackers, unaware of the true depth of human resilience, continued to underestimate their potential. Back in the colonies, life continued alongside preparation. People rebuilt homes, restored infrastructure, and strengthened communication networks. Children returned to schools, learning not only standard subjects, but also skills for safety, problem-solving, and cooperation. Adults worked tirelessly to ensure that communities were ready for any challenge. Even small actions, repairing a solar panel, organizing a supply route, testing a sensor, added to humanity's growing strength. The attacked colony had become a symbol of resilience, not just surviving the attack, but thriving despite it. Across human space, ordinary citizens began to feel a new sense of purpose. They realized that they were part of something larger than themselves. Farmers, engineers, teachers, doctors, and students all played a role in this grand effort. Even those who had once felt powerless now understood that their actions mattered. Every decision, no matter how small, was part of a network of preparation, protection, and learning. The dragon was alive in every human, quietly growing stronger through unity, intelligence, and care. Humans continued to gather intelligence about the attackers. They analyzed movement patterns, communication structures, and technology usage. Analysts shared findings with engineers, who designed better detection systems and protective measures. Scientists worked on improving communication networks to ensure that messages and alerts could travel instantly across vast distances. Drones and satellites monitored the attackers without engaging them directly, collecting information that would later prove invaluable. Every step was deliberate, every observation carefully analyzed. Humans had learned to combine caution with courage, patience with action. At the same time, humans maintained their empathy and humanity. Communities supported one another emotionally as well as practically. Parents comforted children who were anxious about the fleet's movements. Friends helped neighbors rebuild damaged homes or repair equipment. Volunteers assisted in logistics, ensuring that every colony and station received necessary resources. Humans understood that resilience was not only about technology or strategy, but about caring for one another. This balance of strength and compassion made them formidable in a way the attackers could never understand. The attackers, observing from afar, slowly began to recognize the scale of human preparedness. They had expected fear, panic, and division. Instead, they saw unity, intelligence, and careful coordination. Humans were not reactive, they were adaptive. They were not reckless, they were deliberate. The dragon they had hoped to intimidate was awake, alert, and ready, but it did not move blindly. It learned, it planned, and it protected its own with a precision that no single attack could break. Meanwhile, the humans strengthened their communication networks and emergency protocols. Every colony became linked in a system that allowed rapid response to threats. Alerts, resources, and information could be shared instantly. Volunteers monitored equipment, coordinated supplies, and ensured that no settlement felt isolated. This collective effort built confidence and trust among humans. Citizens realized that they were not just protecting their own homes, they were protecting each other. And every action contributed to the larger network of human resilience. The fleet near the attacker's territory remained vigilant. Patrols moved in predictable patterns for efficiency, but the humans had prepared for unpredictability. Drones explored sectors silently. Sensors recorded energy fluctuations, and every crew member knew their role. Even the smallest mistake could be dangerous, but humans had trained to minimize errors. Every movement was deliberate, every decision carefully calculated. They were ready to act decisively if necessary, but they would never act out of anger or fear. The dragon had learned patience as well as strength. Ordinary citizens continued to play a crucial role. Children practiced emergency drills, students contributed to research, workers helped repair equipment, and volunteers coordinated resources. Families shared responsibilities, supporting one another emotionally and practically. Every small contribution mattered. Every person had a role in the larger network. Humans had discovered that courage alone was not enough. Intelligence, patience, and collaboration amplified it. The dragon was not a single entity. It was the collective effort of a species working together. The attackers, gradually realizing their miscalculation, faced a growing dilemma. They had thought humans would crumble under fear or intimidation. Instead, humans had adapted, learned, and strengthened themselves through cooperation and preparation. Every attempt to provoke a reaction only revealed more of humanity's unity and intelligence. The dragon was not reactive. It was deliberate, measured, and unstoppable once fully engaged. Across colonies, humans also focused on innovation. Engineers improved defense systems, scientists developed advanced sensors, and technicians tested communication networks. Volunteers assisted in every practical task. Communities shared knowledge freely, learning from mistakes and successes alike. Even small innovations had a ripple effect, strengthening the collective resilience. Humans were building a civilization that could withstand uncertainty, protect life, and respond intelligently to any threat. In every home, citizens felt the power of collective responsibility. Families discussed strategies, schools taught practical skills, and workers coordinated with neighbors. Every person contributed, directly or indirectly, to the larger effort. Humans had learned that their strength was not just in technology or weapons, but in coordination, empathy, and shared purpose. The dragon was alive in every human being, quietly growing stronger through unity, patience, and care. As months passed, the attackers realized the full extent of their mistake. They had underestimated a species that could adapt, organize, and protect itself. Every action humans had taken rebuilding colonies, coordinating fleets, improving systems, and supporting each other demonstrated a form of strength they could not easily counter. The dragon they had hoped to frighten had awakened fully, and it moved with intelligence, calm, and precision. Humanity's approach remained consistent. No reckless attacks, no unnecessary risk, only protection, preparation, and learning. Fleets monitored, colonies strengthened, and communities supported one another. Education, innovation, and empathy continued to grow alongside technical and strategic readiness. The dragon was deliberate, patient, and ready to act decisively if needed, but it always prioritized care for its people. Stories of courage and cooperation spread across colonies. A teacher organizing a safety drill became as celebrated as an engineer who repaired critical equipment. A volunteer coordinating supply routes was valued as much as a fleet pilot monitoring the attacker's territory. Humans celebrated not just victories in technology or strategy, but victories of spirit, unity, and care. Every contribution mattered. Every person counted. The dragon was built from the collective courage and intelligence of a species. As humans continued to strengthen their defenses, they also extended messages of understanding to neutral species. They emphasized their desire for peace while making it clear that attacks on peaceful colonies would never be tolerated. Their communication was calm, measured, and deliberate, reflecting the mindset that had transformed humans into a coordinated, resilient force. Allies and neutral species began to see humans in a new light. They were no longer a species to underestimate. They were a force of intelligence, courage, and unity. The attacked colony, once vulnerable, had become a beacon of resilience. Its people shared lessons, coordinated with distant colonies, and helped train others in preparedness and response. They had turned tragedy into an opportunity for growth, inspiring humans everywhere to act, think, and protect one another. The dragon was now more than a symbol. It was a living network of coordinated, capable, and determined humans. Every day, humans continued to prepare, improve, and learn. Engineers upgraded systems, scientists analyzed data, and citizens supported one another. The dragon was alive in every settlement, every fleet, and every home. It was a force of patience, intelligence, and courage, ready to respond to threats while prioritizing the protection and care of all humans. The attackers, now fully aware of their miscalculation, realized that their plan to intimidate had failed. They had awakened a force they could not contain or predict.